My name is Detective Michael Chen, and 3 months ago, I thought I'd married the perfect woman. Sarah was quiet, brilliant, and loved our secluded ranch outside Denver. What I didn't know was that our HOA president, Margaret Whitfield, had been watching us from day one, documenting our every move, and plotting something that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. When Margaret tried to have my wife arrested for illegal occupation of our own property, she had no idea she was about to go head-to-head with the director of the FBI. But here's the thing nobody saw coming. Not even me, my wife wasn't the only one with secrets. And by the time the dust settled, everything I believed about love, loyalty, and justice would be turned completely upside down. The morning Margaret Whitfield knocked on my door changed my life forever. I was cleaning my service weapon in our kitchen when I heard the aggressive pounding. Sarah had left early for work. She always left early, claiming meetings in the city, and I was enjoying the rare quiet of our mountain ranch. "Mr. Chen," Margaret's shrill voice cut through the wooden door. "Open up immediately." Margaret Whitfield was everything wrong with suburban power trips wrapped in a 70-year-old woman's body. As HOA president of Pine Ridge Estates, she'd made it her personal mission to torment every homeowner in our development. But we lived on the edge of the development, on 20 acres that technically fell under HOA jurisdiction, but had been grandfathered in with different rules. I opened the door to find Margaret flanked by 2 younger women I didn't recognize, all holding clipboards and wearing matching scowls. "Where's she?" Margaret demanded, pushing past me into my house without invitation. "Where is who?" "Margaret. And get out of my house. Your so-called wife, Sarah. We've been investigating, Mr. Chen, and we know the truth." Margaret's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. "That woman you're living with has no legal right to this property. She's not on the deed, not on the mortgage, and frankly, we have reason to believe she's not even who she claims to be." My blood ran cold. Sarah and I had gotten married 6 months ago in a small ceremony. I'd added her to the deed immediately afterward, or at least I thought I had. The paperwork had been handled by her attorney, someone she'd insisted on using because of her complicated financial situation. "That's ridiculous, Margaret. Sarah is my wife, and this is our home." Margaret smiled like a shark sensing blood. "Is she, though? Because according to county records, there's no marriage certificate on file for Sarah Chen or Sarah Morrison. In fact, there's no record of Sarah Morrison existing before 18 months ago." The room began to spin. I'd met Sarah 2 years ago at a coffee shop downtown. She'd told me she was a consultant, traveled frequently for work, and had recently moved to Colorado from Virginia. I'd never questioned it because I was a cop. I ran background checks professionally, and Sarah had passed every casual verification I'd done. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ladies, show him the documents." The women with Margaret spread papers across my coffee table. County records, property deeds, marriage certificates, or rather, the complete absence of any marriage certificate. My name appeared on everything alone. Sarah's name was nowhere. "Furthermore," Margaret continued, "we have evidence that this Sarah person has been using this property to conduct illegal activities. Strange vehicles coming and going at all hours, and marked packages being delivered, and our security cameras have captured her having secretive meetings with unidentified individuals. Those are lies, Margaret, and you know it, are they? Because I've also discovered something very interesting about you, Detective Chen. Did you know that running an illegal boarding house operation is grounds for immediate eviction under our HOA bylaws? That housing an undocumented individual makes you complicit in. Get out." My voice was deadly calm. "Get out of my house right now." Margaret gathered her papers with smug efficiency. 24 hours, Mr. Chen. You have 24 hours to remove the woman from the premises, or we're calling the authorities. And just so we're clear, I've already spoken with your captain. He's very interested to learn about Detective Chen's mysterious home situation. After they left, I called Sarah immediately, straight to voicemail. I called her office the consulting firm she claimed to work for. I'm sorry. We don't have anyone by that name employed here. Panic clawed at my chest. I spent the next 4 hours making phone calls, checking databases, running every search I could think of. Margaret was right about one thing. Sarah Morrison had appeared in the system 18 months ago with a perfect credit score, flawless background, and absolutely no history before that date. By evening, I was sitting in my patrol car outside our house, staring at the windows and wondering who the hell I'd married. That's when I saw the black SUVs pull up our driveway, 4 of them, with government plates. Sarah stepped out of the lead vehicle. But she wasn't the same quiet consultant I'd married. She moved with the confidence of someone used to command, flanked by agents in tactical gear. She saw my patrol car and walked over, her face a mask I'd never seen before. Michael, we need to talk. Who are you? I asked through my rolled-down window. She took a deep breath. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Morrison. I'm the director of the FBI. And I've been undercover for the past year investigating a domestic terrorism cell that we believe has been operating out of Pine Ridge Estates. You're the FBI director. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. And Margaret Whitfield isn't just your HOA president. She's the cell's operational commander. And she's been using HOA authority to monitor and control a network of illegal activities across 12 states. Michael, you and I being together, it wasn't an accident. But it also wasn't just an assignment. Before I could process what she was telling me, my radio crackled to life. Detective Chen, please respond to your residence immediately. We have reports of federal agents trespassing on private property, and HOA President Whitfield has filed formal charges against your wife for identity theft, fraud, and illegal occupation. Sarah's jaw tightened. Margaret just made the biggest mistake of her life. The next morning, I woke up in a federal safe house. My entire world shattered. Sarah Director Morrison sat across from me at a metal table, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. The woman I'd fallen in love with was gone, replaced by one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country. I need you to understand something, Michael, she began, her voice carrying an authority I'd never heard before. Everything about us, about our relationship, the feelings are real. But the circumstances that brought us together were orchestrated. Orchestrated by who? By me. 18 months ago, we identified Pine Ridge Estates as a hub for a domestic terrorism network calling themselves the Patriot Covenant. They've been responsible for bombing federal buildings, assassinating local officials, and recruiting law enforcement officers. Margaret Whitfield isn't just their local leader, she's their national recruitment coordinator. I felt sick, and you needed a local cop. I needed someone inside law enforcement who lived in the target area, someone with an impeccable record and no political affiliations that would raise suspicion. Detective Michael Chen fit the profile perfectly. So you seduced me for information. Sarah's composure cracked for the first time. It started that way. But Michael, somewhere between our third date and the day I said yes to your proposal, this became real for me, more real than any assignment I've ever worked. Then why didn't you tell me the truth? Because Margaret Whitfield has been recruiting police officers for 3 years, and we couldn't risk you being approached. We needed you to appear as uninvolved as possible while I gathered intelligence from the inside. She pulled out a laptop and showed me surveillance footage that made my stomach turn. Margaret Whitfield meeting with men I recognized from domestic terrorism watch lists. Financial records showing payments to corrupt officials across Colorado. Most disturbing of all, recruitment files with names and photos of local law enforcement, including my own captain. Captain Morrison is compromised, I asked, staring at his photo in Margaret's files. We believe Margaret has been feeding him information and paying him to influence case assignments. Michael, every domestic violence call, every property dispute, every routine patrol you've been assigned to in the past 6 months, they've all been to properties owned by Patriot Covenant members. The pieces started falling into place. The strange calls that never seemed quite right. The captain's insistence that I handle certain cases personally. The way Margaret always seemed to know when I'd be home or away, she's been using me, she's been positioning you. We think the endgame was recruitment. Margaret planned to approach you directly once she documented enough of your patrol patterns and personal vulnerabilities. Sarah closed the laptop and looked at me directly. But yesterday, when she tried to have me evicted, she accelerated her timeline. She's planning something big. And she needed to eliminate what she saw as a security risk me. What's the plan? Now we fight back. But Michael, I need you to know that the charges Margaret filed aren't going away. She's claiming identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. She's using the HOA's legal authority to press criminal charges. And she has enough documentation to make them stick if we can't prove her real agenda. What kind of documentation? Sarah's expression darkened. She has recordings, Michael. Conversations between us that she's edited to make it sound like we were planning to defraud the horror and use your police position for personal gain. She has financial records that appear to show me funneling money through shell companies, and she has witness testimony from other residents claiming they saw us engaging in suspicious activities. All fabricated, expertly fabricated. Margaret Whitfield spent 30 years as our intelligence analyst before she retired to Colorado. She knows how to build an airtight case. That afternoon, I received the court summons. The state of Colorado versus Sarah Morrison and Michael Chen. Charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, theft by deception, and abuse of police authority. If convicted, I'd lose my job, my pension, and potentially face 5 to 10 years in prison. But Sarah had a plan. We're going to use Margaret's own tactics against her. Every recording device she's placed around Pine Ridge Estates, every financial transaction, every communication with her terrorist network, it's all been captured by our surveillance operation. The problem is, we need to get that evidence into court without compromising our ongoing investigation. How? We're going to let Margaret think she's winning. You're going to continue living at the ranch, acting like a disgraced cop whose wife abandoned him. I'm going to appear in court as Sarah Morrison, the fraud suspect, represented by a public defender who's going to make all the wrong arguments. That sounds like a terrible plan. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Margaret is going to present evidence that makes me look guilty, and you're going to have to watch me potentially face conviction. But Michael, the moment she testifies under oath about her investigation into our activities, she's going to inadvertently admit to federal crimes that will bring down her entire network. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my empty house, officially suspended from the police department pending the outcome of the trial. Margaret had been by twice more, each time with additional evidence and smug satisfaction. The local news had picked up the story. Local detective and mysterious wife accused of HOA fraud. But Sarah was right about one thing: Margaret was getting sloppy. Her confidence was making her reckless. She'd started bragging to neighbors about her investigation, and those conversations were being recorded by FBI surveillance teams positioned throughout the day. The night before the trial was set to begin, Sarah called me from an untraceable phone. Michael, tomorrow everything changes. No matter what you hear in that courtroom, no matter how convincing Margaret's evidence seems, remember that we have everything we need to destroy her. But I need you to trust me completely, even when it looks like I'm losing. Sarah, what aren't you telling me? There was a long pause. Margaret isn't the only one who's been planning for this moment, and tomorrow, she's going to learn that trying to destroy the director of the FBI was the biggest mistake she'll ever make. Judge Patricia Hendricks called the court to order at 9 a.m. sharp, and I could feel Margaret Whitfield's satisfaction radiating from the prosecution's side of the courtroom. She sat in the front row, perfectly dressed, surrounded by her horror cronies. Like a queen holding court. Sarah entered as Sarah Morrison, defendant, wearing a simple blue suit and flanked by what appeared to be an overworked public defender named James Walsh. She didn't look at me as she took her seat, maintaining the fiction that we were estranged co-conspirators. District Attorney Rebecca Martinez stood to deliver her opening statement. And I realized with growing horror that the case against us was even stronger than I'd feared. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal of public trust and deliberate fraud perpetrated by two individuals who thought they were above the law. Detective Michael Chen and the woman calling herself Sarah Morrison engaged in a systematic conspiracy to defraud the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, abuse police authority, and steal property through false documentation. Martinez clicked through a presentation that made my blood run cold. Bank records showing Sarah depositing large cash sums, recorded conversations that sounded damning when taken out of context, property documents that appeared to show forged signatures. The evidence will show that Sarah Morrison is not who she claims to be, that her marriage to Detective Chen was a sham designed to gain illegal access to property and HOA benefits, and that Detective Chen used his position as a law enforcement officer to intimidate witnesses and obstruct justice. When Margaret Whitfield was called as the state's key witness, she took the stand with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. Mrs. Whitfield, Martinez began. Please tell the court about your first suspicions regarding the defendants. I've been HOA president for 8 years, and I've never encountered anything like this situation. From the moment Sarah Morrison appeared in our community, things didn't add right. Late-night meetings with unidentified individuals, cash payments for services, and a complete lack of verifiable background information. What actions did you take to investigate? I began documenting everything. As HOA president, it's my responsibility to ensure our community's safety and legal compliance. I installed security cameras, conducted financial audits, and interviewed residents about suspicious activities. This was the moment Sarah had been waiting for. Margaret was admitting, under oath, to conducting surveillance on resident surveillance that had captured evidence of her own criminal activities. Mrs. Whitfield, Sarah's public defender Walsh asked during cross-examination, you mentioned installing security cameras. Did you have permission from residents to record their private activities? The HOA bylaws give us authority to monitor common areas and investigate violations. But these cameras were recording private conversations and activities on personal property, weren't they? Margaret's confidence flickered, only when necessary for community protection. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm showing you Exhibit 47 financial records from your personal HOA account. Can you explain these irregular deposits totaling over $200,000 in the past 18 months? The courtroom went silent. Martinez objected, but Judge Hendricks allowed the question. Those are HOA fees and assessment collections from which residents? Because according to your own HOA records, total annual fees for all residents should only amount to $95,000. Margaret's face was turning. Brad, there were special assessments for community improvements. Walsh pulled out another document. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm showing you what appears to be communication records between your personal phone and individuals on federal watch lists. Can you explain why you've been in regular contact with Marcus Webb, identified by the FBI as a domestic terrorism suspect? I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Whitfield, are you familiar with an organization called the Patriot Covenant? Margaret shot to her feet. This is harassment. I'm the victim here. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. Mrs. Whitfield, please answer the question. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The courtroom erupted. Martinez looked like she'd been blindsided. And I realized that Sarah's public defender wasn't overworked or incompetent. He was FBI. But Margaret wasn't finished. During redirect examination, she played her final card. Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence that proves these defendants were engaged in criminal conspiracy. She produced a recording device. This is a conversation I recorded 3 weeks ago between the defendants, planning to flee the country with stolen HOA funds. The recording played. And I heard voices that sounded like Sarah and me discussing moving money offshore and disappearing. It was expertly edited, but completely fabricated. Mrs. Whitfield, Judge Hendricks asked, how did you obtain this recording? I placed listening devices in the defendant's home during a legitimate HOA inspection. You bugged their house for community safety purposes. Sarah's attorney Wilt smiled. Your Honor, I'd like to call a surprise witness, Agent Director Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The courtroom fell silent as the real Sarah Morrison stood up from the defendant's table, removing a wire from under her blouse. Your Honor, for the past year, I've been conducting an undercover investigation into a domestic terrorism network operating out of Pine Ridge Estates. Every conversation Mrs. Whitfield just played was recorded by her illegally placed surveillance equipment, capturing fabricated conversations created by FBI technical specialists to test the network's intelligence gathering capabilities. Margaret Whitfield's face went white. That's impossible. You're Sarah Morrison, the fraud suspect. No, Mrs. Whitfield. I'm FBI Director Sarah Morrison, and you've just admitted, under oath, to conducting illegal surveillance, conspiracy to commit fraud, and communication with known domestic terrorists. Furthermore, every surveillance device you placed in Pine Ridge Estates has been monitored by the FBI for the past 18 months. FBI agents began entering the courtroom from every door. Margaret Whitfield, you're under arrest for domestic terrorism, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and violation of federal surveillance laws. You have the right to remain silent. As Margaret was being handcuffed, she screamed, "This is a setup. You can't do this to me." Sarah walked over to where I was sitting, no longer hiding behind her cover identity. Michael, I'm sorry you had to go through this, but we needed Margaret to present all her evidence in court. Everything she just showed the jury, every recording, every financial document, every piece of surveillance equipment is now evidence in our federal case against the Patriot Covenant. But as the FBI led Margaret away, she turned back with a smile that made my blood freeze. Director Morrison, you have no idea what you've just done. This trial was never about convicting you or your husband. It was about getting you here. In this building, at this exact moment, the lights went out. The courthouse emergency lighting kicked in as FBI agents immediately surrounded Sarah, weapons drawn. But Margaret Whitfield was laughing from behind her handcuffs. Did you really think I spent 18 months planning this operation just to frame a local cop and his federal agent wife? Director Morrison, you've been playing checkers while I've been playing chess. Through the chaos, I heard explosions from outside the building, car alarms, screaming, and the unmistakable sound of automatic weapons fire. Margaret, what did you do? Sarah demanded. What I did was sacrifice myself to eliminate the one person who could dismantle our entire national network, the Patriot Covenant doesn't need me alive, Director Morrison. But they needed you dead. Sarah was speaking rapidly into her radio. All units, the courthouse is under attack. Implement Protocol 7 immediately, Margaret continued, her voice carrying over the chaos. Every law enforcement officer in this building is either one of ours or about to be eliminated. Every federal agent you brought to Colorado is walking into a trap. And every piece of evidence you think you have against our network was deliberately fed to you through carefully planned intelligence leaks. The courtroom doors burst open as armed men in tactical gear stormed in, but they weren't FBI. Sarah pushed me behind the defendant's table as gunfire erupted around us. Michael, listen to me carefully, she whispered urgently. Everything Margaret just said is true. We've been played from the beginning. The Patriot Covenant sacrificed their Colorado operation to expose and eliminate FBI leadership. How many people are going to die because of this? Unless we stop this right now, potentially hundreds. Michael, I need you to know something. When I told you our relationship was real, I meant it. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, that was never a lie. Through the gunfire, I could hear Margaret shouting orders to her people. Find Director Morrison. "Do not let her leave this building alive." But Sarah was already moving. She wasn't just the FBI director, she was a trained field agent. And watching her work was like seeing an entirely different person. She disarmed one attacker, used his weapon to provide covering fire, and began systematically taking down Margaret's team. "The basement," she shouted to me. "There is an emergency tunnel that leads to the federal building across the street." As we fought our way through smoke and chaos toward the courthouse basement, I realized that Margaret had made one critical mistake in her obsession with destroying Sarah. She'd revealed the true scope of the Patriot Covenant's infiltration of law enforcement information that was being recorded by Sarah's emergency recording device and transmitted directly to FBI headquarters. In the basement tunnel, Sarah stopped and turned to me. "Michael, I have to go back." "What, Sarah? That's suicide. Judge Hendricks is still in that courtroom. So are 12 jurors and at least 30 innocent people. Margaret's people aren't just here to kill me, they're planning to make this look like a terrorist attack by foreign agents. If they succeed, it will justify everything the Patriot Covenant has been working toward. Then I'm going with you." "No, Michael, someone needs to get this recording to the FBI. Everything Margaret admitted to, everything she just revealed about their national operations, it's all here." She pressed the recording device into my hands. "This is the evidence that will bring down their entire network." Sarah kissed me, and for a moment, she wasn't the FBI director or an undercover agent. She was just the woman I'd fallen in love with. "Tell them the truth about us, Michael. Tell them that sometimes the most important missions are the ones that happen by accident." I watched her disappear back into the smoke and chaos, knowing I might never see her again. 40-7 minutes later, I was in the FBI field office across the street. When the courthouse siege ended, Sarah had not only survived, she'd managed to capture Margaret Whitfield and 3 other high-ranking Patriot Covenant leaders alive. But the real twist came 3 hours later. When FBI analysts finished processing the intelligence we'd gathered, Margaret Whitfield wasn't the Patriot Covenant's operational commander. She was middle management. The recordings from her surveillance equipment had captured conversations with someone they called the director, and voice analysis confirmed it was someone already inside He FBI's senior leadership. Sarah called me that evening from a secure location. "Michael, we got them. All of them." Margaret's surveillance equipment captured enough evidence to identify and arrest 43 Patriot Covenant members across 12 states, including the real mastermind. Who was it? Assistant Director Marcus Thompson, my own deputy. He's been feeding information to domestic terrorism networks for 4 years, and he used the Pine Ridge operation to try to eliminate me when I got too close to uncovering his activities. So Margaret was working for someone inside the FBI. Margaret thought she was working for a Patriot network fighting government corruption. She never knew Thompson was using her organization to eliminate his own colleagues and advance his position within the Bureau. 6 months later, I was back at work, reinstated with full honors and a commendation for my role in exposing the largest domestic terrorism network in Colorado history. Sarah and I were officially married again in a ceremony attended by federal agents instead of HOA members. Margaret Whitfield was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Assistant Director Thompson received the death penalty, and the Pine Ridge Estates HOA was permanently dissolved, with all property restrictions lifted. But the real victory came when Sarah decided to step down as FBI director to accept a position as head of the Denver field office. We kept the ranch, expanded it to 50 acres, and never had to deal with another HOA president again. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not in foreign countries or federal buildings, but in our own backyards, against people who abuse small amounts of power to cause enormous damage. And sometimes, the person you're meant to spend your life with turns out to be exactly who they said they were, just with a much more interesting job than you originally thought. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and unexpected romance, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because real life is often stranger and more dramatic than any fiction we could ever imagine. The truth is out there. Sometimes it's just hiding behind an horror complaint.